Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Plus. We're bringing you stories from the world of business, policy and economy. The top story we're talking at this hour, the mutual fund industry's asset under management has reached 50.78 lakh crore rupees for the first time in the month of December of 2023. This as per data shared by Association of Mutual Funds in India, AMFI. The mutual fund folios surged to an all-time high of 16.49 crores, showcasing an increase from 16.18 crores recorded in the month of November of 2023. The equity inflows continued to go high for 34 consecutive months, reaching 16,997 crore rupees in December of 2023 as compared to 15,514.5 crore rupees in the previous month. Now, if you break down the inflows by fund category, small cap funds saw an inflow of 3,857 crore rupees in December, marking an increase from November's 3,699 crore rupees, while large cap funds experienced an outflow of 281 crore rupees as opposed to 307 crore inflow recorded in the month of November. In contrast, mid cap funds recorded an inflow of 1,393 crore rupees, showing a decrease from previous month's inflow of 2,666 crore rupees. On the SIP front, SIP saw an inflow of 17,610 crore rupees, hinting at a change and perhaps a shift in how people are investing and what route they are taking. This as per the data from AMFI as of December of 2023. Karthik Malhotra with me here in the studio. Karthik, very good afternoon. What are you making of the data emerging from AMFI?
I think it's very simple, Shweta, that Indian retail investors are sipping their way into the mutual fund industry, and I think it is fairly obvious that even if there were these talks about the Indian markets being overheated, and December incidentally was the month where we saw the Sensex breach the 70,000 mark, and despite that, I think Indian retail investors are not worried about their timing of entering into the markets to make their investments, and the route that they are taking is the SIP route and not lump sum. So I think strategically Indian investors are pretty much oriented with what experts say, that don't try to time the market, don't try to enter with a large corpus immediately, because that could wreak havoc for your investments if the markets were to correct. And SIP continues to be the route that Indian investors are taking. Now, incidentally, what stuck out this time for me was that the mid-cap funds
I wanted to come to that. And I mean, come to think of it, the categories of fund in which people are investing, it appears there is some sort of interest towards small caps, then mid caps, as opposed to large cap funds,
absolutely,
because people are withdrawing money from there.
True. So what seems to be the case this time around is that we have seen the small cap rally, and that rally has lasted many months. In fact, almost 6 to 8 months of small cap rally is what we've seen, and that is something that has driven the overall indices also to their highs. But the risks associated with small caps are, of course, there for all to see.
Absolutely.
Now, the next option are the large caps, and I think the large caps, the safer companies, the blue chip companies, is where investors perhaps have already booked their profits. So they entered with SIPs or otherwise, and they saw their investments give more than decent returns back to them, and they decided to perhaps cash out of that category and look at the next best option, which were the mid-cap funds. And the mid-cap funds is where all the action has been, at least in the month of December.
So park your money, which is what retail investors are doing at the moment. They're parking their money in the small caps and mid-cap funds, perhaps withdrawing and booking profit from blue chip companies. That is according to the AMFI data. The numbers there quite staggering at the moment, but come to think of it, the overall AUMs, and I think we can spend about 30 seconds discussing that, the $50 trillion mark, the 50 lakh crore mark has been touched.
Absolutely. I think, obviously any such headline is good news. It's great for the sentiment of investors. It is great for the India's sentiment per se. That is not just the FIIs. It is not just the large
the domestic equity
firms.
Investors, which
these are retail investors also, who are really inch by inch building this case for being bullish on India, and they continue to remain bullish on India.
Absolutely. So it's not for the FIIs who've just started showing interest in the Indian markets once again, but for the domestic equity investors, the domestic retail investors, due to whom the numbers there on your screens at this point in time at 50 lakh crore rupees as far as the total AUM, asset under management, for mutual funds is concerned. But shifting focus to another big data story that is coming in on the broadcast, and by the way of automobile retail sales numbers, because those numbers are also out. The automobile retail sales in India rose 11% in 2023 as compared to 2022. Now this as per data released by Federation of Automobile Dealers Association, FADA. The overall domestic automobile retail sales stood at 2 crore 38,000 units, 30 lakh thousand units, I beg your pardon, in 2023, as compared to 2 crore 14 lakh units in 2022. Passenger vehicle sales also stood at 38 lakh units last year, 11% jump from 34 lakh units in 2024. Similarly, two-wheeler sales were also up by 9% as compared to 1 crore 70 lakh units from 1 crore 55 lakh units in the January to December period of 2022. Three-wheeler sales were up 58%, while commercial vehicle retail sales were up 8%. Overall, a growth of about 11% in the automobile sales at this point in time. You know, come to think of it, when you look at this data, I think what stood out for me was that 58% jump in the three-wheeler sales, Karthik.
I think, yeah, I mean, it's a large number, almost 60% increase in three-wheeler sales, but that's not really the...
Any indicator of what's happening?
I mean, it's great. I believe that because of, the focus towards green energy and the kind of transmission required and the kind of engines required for green mobility, there could have been some end-of-life auto rickshaws, three-wheelers across the country that may have been phased out, and that sort of skewed it in favor of more and more new three-wheelers coming onto the roads. But I think
we do have Manish. Let's take that question from him. Sure. Manish Raj Singhania, President FADA, joining us on the show. Manish, hi, good afternoon. Thank you for taking time out. What are you making of that three-wheeler jump of 60%? What three-wheeler categories are we talking about here?
So overall, three-wheeler has been doing pretty well throughout the year, and this massive jump has primarily contributed due to majorly transition from ICE vehicles to EV vehicles. Now, almost 55% of the of the three-wheeler retails are constituted by electric vehicles. So there's a major shift over there. What has also buoyed this market, these numbers, is, while in ICE vehicle, there was a permit requirement. There was a limited permit called the quota of permit issued in a particular city, and accordingly, three-wheeler purchases were made. But while you buy an electric vehicle three-wheeler, then you don't require a permit. So, after COVID,
So what percentage of the sales is owing to electric vehicle? What is the share of electric vehicles?
Almost 55% of the total sales. Electric vehicles are almost 55%, and after COVID, a lot of migrant workers coming back to town seeking jobs. Electric vehicles have been an ideal job opportunity for them, and good employment opportunity for everyone. And the numbers have been growing, and we know we don't have a very good mobility or urban mobility in our cities and towns. So three-wheelers can be very handful and very helpful. So we had a market there, we had demand, we had a requirement there, and that is what this LMM, what we call last mile mobility, is fulfilling.
Okay. And particularly talking about the sales in the month of December, because sales dipped by about 30% when you talk about the month of December. Was this in line with the expectation, or is this lower than what December traditionally gives you by the way of retail sales?
You're specifically talking about three-wheeler?
Overall sales, sir, in the month of December.
So December, we were up by almost 21% overall in the month of December. So I think majorly we had this marriage season there, and plus after a long time, after 2-3 years during COVID times, we didn't have this December end offers or the year end offers. But this time, due to the high inventory levels at the dealership, and we could finally see the December offers coming in, and a lot of youth discounts in PV space especially. That's why the growth and good contribution in PV and two-wheeler space happened.
Okay, and a growth of 11% over 2023, is that in line with the expectations? What are your forward projections for 2024?
So I think auto industry is on a good path. We are growing in numbers in everywhere, whether it is two-wheeler, four-wheeler, or commercial vehicle or three-wheeler. All segments are performing well. And with the kind of consumer index, positivity index going up, and the overall positive economic outlook, the kind of models that OEMs have planned for the next financial year or next calendar year, and the growing penetration of electric vehicles. So all this will definitely contribute towards a positive growth trend in overall auto retails of India. I think the only dampener would be the rising interest rates, which have been consistently going up. And overall, in past 7-8 months, we have seen almost a 2.5% increase. So that can be a bit dampener for overall, the mindset of the consumer. But the excitement is still there. Bookings are still there with the dealers. Though, if you recollect, last year waiting periods were up to 2 years. Now that those have come down to 4 months, and that too only on few models, few variants. So supplies have improved. So everything is looking good for the auto industry. I think we can overall, for the next calendar year, we can comfortably say we can have a high single-digit growth for the overall auto industry.
Okay, and I have to ask you the million dollar question before I let you go, and that is with respect to electric vehicles. Now, electric vehicles clocked about 1.5 million sales figure in the year of 2023. What are your projections for 2024? What is the excitement around electric vehicles in 2024?
So for electric vehicles, though three-wheeler has been leading the charge, I should say, they have been doing pretty well. But our legacy players really need to come out with a lot of new models and new variants for Indian consumer at large. So we need to see our legacy players like maybe Maruti, like Hyundai or Mahindras and Maruti and Tatas, or maybe in two-wheeler space, Heroes and Hondas. These people need to come up with their own range of electric vehicles. Because these
Are
are
you
the
not very
brands.
happy with the efforts that they have made in the EV space?
No, still I think it is just the start. We are just in two-wheeler, we are hardly at 5.5% penetration. And in two-wheeler, in passenger car, we are just at 2% penetration in terms of electric. So there's a huge potential out there. We are already aspiring for almost 25-30% penetration. So for that to happen, and with the FAME subsidy kind of, curtailing down, we need a larger range of model, larger range, charging stations in places, and a lot of facility of all the infrastructure in and around
Right.
electric vehicle for that dream story to realize actually.
All right. So a huge potential there in the electric vehicle segment. That's the word coming in from Manish Singhania. So thank you very much for taking time out. Good to have you on the show. But with that, it's time for a quick short commercial break. We'll be back in just a bit.
Yes, the scale of the attack surprised us.
When you get a series of alerts, 16 intelligence alerts, if Maharashtra government at that time had alerted the Coast Guard and the Navy, this 2611 would not have happened at all.
And one of the details they had planned was to use these dhagas to mislead the investigative agencies.
All this was to be presented as a Hindu terror.
So it was a Pakistan operation. The LET was the front end.
As the attacks were on, it was clear that they were planned and launched from Pakistani territory.
For all of those victims of terror that was exported from Pakistan over the years, including but not limited to 2611.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
Pakistani spy agency ISI's sinister plan to target India. Training women to honey trap top civil and military officials. Counter honey trapping ops initiated by India. But gullible victims still caught in the web. Top military intelligence experts break down the web of deception. Colonel Hani Bakshi explains the phenomena of honey trap.
जहाँ पे भी आपको लगेगा, उनको लगेगा कि there is a person who is susceptible to women, who's making a lot of women friends on the social media. That is where they will make a spoof account and then start luring the person.
Colonel Pavitran Rajan decodes the psyche of the victim and the predator.
But when you go up the chain, no one enforces it to people at the top. That disciplinary regime and the security regime is not enforced at the top. And they usually have a public profile where it is much more easier to approach that person.
A News 9 special on how modern technology has added teeth to the ancient spying tactic.
Our story takes you inside Pakistan's honey trap machine.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
Welcome back. You're watching Business Plus. Indian single malt sales have reportedly overtaken their global peers in India sales. According to an estimate by Confederation of Indian Alcoholic Beverage Companies, Indian single malts account for nearly 53% of the total sales in 2023. The domestic brands have lodged a growth of about 23% in 2023, an impressive surge compared to imported brands which grew at merely 11%. Of the total sales of around 6,75,000 cases of 9 litre each of single malts, 3,45,000 cases came from Indian origin makers. The top Indian brands which contributed to the milestone include Amrut, Paul John, Radico Rampur and Indri among others. Now, Indian whiskey makers have recently emerged as the top players in the 33 billion spirits market globally. Notably, Indian single malt Indri was crowned as the world's best whiskey in August of 2023. What is the growth potential looking like? To talk about that is joining Vikram Achanta, who's the co-founder of 30 Best Bars India and founder of Taliho. Also on the show with us is Neeta Kapoor, CEO of International Spirits and Wine Association of India. I want to come to you first, Neeta. Thank you very much for taking time out. You know, when you look at these numbers and you look at how Indian malts are doing globally at 53% market share, what is the potential for importers or for Indian whiskey makers to perhaps import in times to come?
You know, Shweta, I think it's a great beginning. It's a fantastic story. I'm just going to add a few caveats to state that, you know, the Indian origin single malts are an interesting story, be it that 70% of what is being produced is being exported. So clearly this is, you know, I would say the heralding of the Indian products, number one. Number two is that this difference between foreign, which is what you call international single malts and vis-a-vis Indian single malts is essentially about, you know, about a very slim margin. So we shall wait and see. But be that as it may, it's a stellar performance where I think Paul John leads the single malt as they've been one of the very early movers in the export market, followed by, of course, you have, you know, Rampur, and now you've seen Diageo launching the domestic brand Godawan. Pernod is launched longitude 77. So I think it's going to be a fantastic story going forward. It's going to be a market at the premium end is going to be a mix between Scotch and malts. Yeah. And that's when I come to the second point. When the Indian domestic, story is so strong, then, and this is what, at International Spirits and Wine Association, we've been saying, that then, the domestic brand being so robust in product development, the FTA should be seen as an opportunity. And I'm particularly referring to the India-UK FTA and saying, let's just kind of, look at rationalizing of the imported duty structures, which is 150% for imported products. And the Indian industry doesn't need those kind of protective duty structure measures. And the single malt growth is, an ample evidence of that.
All right, very well. Vikram, I would want you to weigh in on that. I think an interesting commentary coming in there that we don't need those sort of duty structures because there is a large room for Indian single malts. In your own experience, when people are ordering, when people are, making that purchase, are they now increasingly preferring Indian brands? Is there a brand preference that has now changed?
First of all, Shweta, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here today evening. And I think the single malt industry in India, the Indian single malt sector, is still a relatively nascent sector, and it's tremendous to see the strides that it's made in the last 14 to 15 years, ever since, I would say, Amrit Fusion was anointed by Jim Murray as the third best whiskey in the world. The strategies that they've chosen also has been quite smart, and first to get the overseas accolades by critics and consumers in exports markets, both in the case of, say, Paul John, Amrut, and also for Rampur, and a strategy which is being echoed now by other brands which have followed in their wake. So it's created that pent-up demand, I'd say, by the Indian consumer to consume something which they haven't had really access to, and which is getting fated in overseas markets. So why can't they consume it here? The Indian consumer has also got increasing confidence in purchasing Indian brands like single malts, and definitely the whole Indian craft spirit story, which we've had gin come into play in a large extent. And the whiskey consumer is also an experimentative consumer. So they by and large might not necessarily want to be stuck with, say, only one brand. They're quite open to drinking different taste profiles and flavors and expressions, which has been quite in vogue, I'd say, also by the Indian single malts, which we're having more and more of these brands come into the market now.
Okay. So it's not just the price point then. It's more than the price point. It's the variety that Indian brands are now offering at this point.
That's true. And there's also a distinct product difference between, say, single malts from Scotland and single malts from India. There are two major differences. One is in the kind of barley that is used. So we use a different strain of barley in India as opposed to Scotland, which has a far higher protein content. And that results in a whiskey which tastes markedly different from the primarily more fruity and floral textures of, say, Scottish single malt. So our flavor profile is a little bolder, shall I say, in our expression, something which Indians possibly also like in their cuisine, and why not in their whiskey too? Yeah. And the second aspect, is the temperatures in India. Considering the extremely high temperatures where these casks are sitting and maturing, there's a much marked interaction between the cask and the liquid inside, which results in, again, different flavor profiles developing for these Indian single malts. So there are some very intrinsic product differences which also resulting in some interesting flavors and expressions for the Indian single malts.
All right, very, very interesting outlook there. I think what Indians like to eat, that's Vikram saying, what Indians like in their food perhaps is what they also like in their whiskey. But I want to come back to you, Neetha. What exactly, according to you, are some of the growth drivers for the alcobev industry at the moment? We talked about how well single malts are doing, over 100% rise year on year. In fact, some would peg it at about 200% as per various estimates out there. What, according to you, are going to be drivers in the alcobev industry?
There are about 4 growth drivers. One, clearly, as it is for most sectors, market-facing sectors, infrastructure plays a significant role, and all of us, even as laymen, have seen significant improvement in infrastructure in most of the states. So clearly infrastructure. Second is digitization. The way we now handle our money, our purchases are essentially a proof that, digitization accelerates, consumption accelerates, the money inflow. Third is you're looking at urbanization. As more and more tier 3, 4 cities come into the urbanization arena, that is going to be the third one. And the fourth really is going to be as India enters into bilateral conversations and bilateral talks, there would be a significant improvement for the industry, and not just the alcobev industry, but all its allied industries of food and beverage, agriculture, travel and tourism. All of these will also the base would go up significantly.
All right. And
that is why we are saying that the industry could easily cross 2% of the nominal GDP of the country, which is significant.
All right. And since we are on that growth number, I would therefore want to ask you, what sort of growth are you anticipating in the year to come? Some estimates say about 2% of the nominal GDP. What is your expectation as far as the growth in alcobev industry is concerned?
I think if I was to look at the IWSR data, we are saying that, and I'm talking really about spirits here, we would say around 4%, 3.5%, 4% on a large base is where the alcobev industry, the spirits would grow over the next 5 years. But then alongside spirits, you've got, the vodkas, the rums, and the other products also, the gins that would be growing. So yes, it would clearly be about 60 billion. Yeah.
Okay.
As far as the value of the industry is concerned, the tax will significantly grow.
Okay, over $60 billion. Vikram, do you concur with that number as far as the growth in alcobev industry is concerned? Over $60 billion. Are Indian brands going to soon take over not just their global peers, but the market size of India seems to be fast expanding?
Yes, I think absolutely. No disagreements there when it comes to the growth of the Indian alcobev market. And I think every global player has their eyes very firmly tuned in India as they see the market expanding, the number of consumers coming into the legal drinking age growing by leaps and bounds every year, and the consumer getting more experimentative, the consumer definitely premiumizing to a far greater extent and wanting to consume something which is top shelf. They're interested definitely in drinking better, if not drinking more, something which I think is music to the ears of premium brands around the world. They're open to exploring new categories which are coming to the Indian market, like tequila and mezcal, for example. So very much mirroring trends that we're seeing overseas, also in the Indian market when it comes to the way alcobev is taking off. We run the 30 Best Bars India property, and the way Indian bars have taken off in the last 3 to 4 years, we're now amongst the best bars in Asia, even the best bars in the world, purely from the kind of cocktail programs, the bar design, the quality of bar talent that we have. So I think we're very well positioned for our next stage of growth, and a couple of things which would really help take us there. I just need to plug those gaps, and I think we'll get there pretty fast.
Okay, and for a country that frowns upon alcohol, those numbers look very well for the alcobev industry. Vikram, thank you very, very much for taking time out. Neeta Kapoor, thank you to you as well, both of you. Thank you for taking time out and for sharing that crucial piece of information. Alcobev industry expected to grow and take over the world. That's the message coming in. As far as the growth of whiskies is concerned, the Indian single malt now seem to have overtaken their global foreign peers, commanding a market share of 53% in India, particularly growing at triple digit for that matter. Indians consuming more whiskey than ever before, as well as consuming more Indian-made whiskey than ever before. But with that, it's a wrap on this show. Thank you very much for watching.
उन्होंने मुझे बताया था कि आप चिंता मत करो, मैं आपको भरोसा दिलाता हूँ, फिर ये मेरा परिवार सब खत्म हो गया.
In a disturbing discovery on the Minnesota-Canada border, Police found the bodies of 4 family members who they say froze to death.
Sent shockwaves across 2 continents and left many people asking a simple question: why?
प्रवीण भाई ने मुझे बताया था कि मैं घूमने के लिए, मेरा वीज़ा आया है कनाडा का, तो मैं घूमने के लिए जा रहा हूँ। फिर बाद में जो उन्होंने मुझे बताया कि